The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, or the TUCP, is urging President Bongbong Marcos to exercise emergency powers under the oil deregulation law. TUCP Representative 𝗪𝗢𝗥𝗪𝗘𝗥𝗦 says the government may temporarily take over or direct operations in the oil industry if a national emergency is declared. He stressed that global conflicts are now directly affecting Filipino households, turning an international crisis into a domestic burden. Mendoza added that existing laws already gives the Department of Energy authority to act, but questioned how long government will delay using these powers. The TUCP also called for a national emergency summit, bringing together key sectors to address the impact of the rising oil prices. Joining us now is the spokesperson of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, Carlos Miguel Oñate. Good morning, Sir Oñate. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Danny. Good morning to all our viewers.
Sir, this call to use emergency powers is a very strong call and actually goes counter to what was announced yesterday, at least by the palace, saying that this is not a national emergency crisis situation just yet. The government is on top of it. We are still monitoring the situation. We have enough food. Give us your opinion on that and why you call this an emergency situation.
Yeah, the TUCP, all that the TUCP has asked for is for the executive to actually consider all options, and that includes the declaration of a state of national emergency, because we learned in the oil deregulation law that there is actually an emergency power provision wherein if there is a national emergency or when public interest so requires, the Department of Energy can actually direct the operations of gas companies. What we are saying is not really for government to take over the oil industry, but essentially to direct more strictly the gas companies. In particular, we would like the Department of Energy to request from the gas companies and to mandate the transparent actual disclosure of their supply inventory as well as their acquisition costs or their pricing computations. This is to ensure that we avoid crisis profiteering. Further, we would like that the executive actually recognize that this is a national emergency, because if gas prices are not it's not anymore fitting the price boards, and we have record high diesel prices hurting almost all sectors, especially workers, we believe that this is a national emergency, and the government should actually conduct a national emergency summit so that they can directly engage with the sectors such as labor and the business, which are the most impacted by this Middle East crisis.
How long are you calling for, Because as mentioned by the president just yesterday, we don't know how long this war is going to take. We don't know the direction of the oil prices. And he's still, in fact, the Senate has already passed on third and final reading the special powers for the suspension of fuel excise taxes. And he says he's not yet going to use it. It depends, diba? So how long do you think we still have time for these decisions to be made?
Every day of delay is hurting workers. Workers' purchasing power, especially our over 5 million minimum wage earners, they are left with an empty bag. Congress recently adjourned yesterday without even talking about the legislated wage hike, which has been pending for already a year in this 20th Congress, and which was passed by both the Senate and the House in the 19th Congress. That is why all that we are asking for from the President is to actually exhibit emergency leadership. No less than him already recognized that he is certified as urgent, in which the Senate and the House already passed the emergency powers to suspend excise tax on fuel or reduce. But we were surprised that the President is not yet keen on using it. In fact, the TUCP has long also advocated for the immediate abolition of the 12% value-added tax on electricity, because we have to caution the impact of these rising prices. And as you have said, the uncertainty, we do not know how long this will last. That is why as early as now, we are calling on the President to actually have a national emergency summit so that we could chart our ways forward, especially come April, when I think there would also be concerns not only about pricing but also about the supply of fuel, especially diesel, and which will have knock-on effects on the electricity, on our most basic commodities.
Are you calling for a complete re-regulation of the oil industry, and you're saying that hindi gumagana itong deregulation for the ordinary workers and we need to revisit this completely? Or are you just asking for the president to step in just for this short amount of time?
Certainly, in the long run, we have to revisit the oil deregulation law because we feel that it has been a playground, especially for the largest gas companies to profit, and that government seems to appear helpless and powerless. That is why what we are asking is, during this crisis, in the short term, the government can step in, because we think that the market forces are already failing. So there is a war in the Middle East. Our transport sector workers who were actually looking forward to a fare hike today were suspended. Then they were promised for fuel subsidy, and besides the point, our over 1 million delivery riders seem to be included from that fuel subsidy, not to mention the limited 5,000 pesos. How long will 5,000 pesos last for our transport sector workers? So whereas our minimum wage earners, they do not have subsidy. There is still no free rides as we speak today. They are thinking of discounts for train rides. So what we're asking for is free bus and train rides, just like what we had during the pandemic, because workers need every help that they need now. That is why we are asking for the president to step in now before it's too late.
Sir, are there not risks if we re-regulate? As you mentioned, no, it's going to be a lot of power on the hands of the president, and that's actually why this has been deliberated for so long. In fact, shinorte na nga from this fuel excise tax suspension. The Congress version was 6 months of power, and now it's to 3 months, because of course there's a lot of questioning by the citizens right now on the abuse of power in government, on the usage of our taxes, where this money goes. So is not the re-regulation going to also be questioned? Because for a long time that was the case, until of course it was deregulated to give more power, presumably, diba, to competitive markets instead of the government. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, the competition is there in a free market, but we are now in a crisis. So we cannot be doing business as usual. And also, we cannot be in denial mode, no? Because we are actually disappointed that no less than the palace press officer has stated that we are not yet in that situation. We are dismayed because it seems to appear that they are quicker in dismissing this all options approach that we are advocating, including this emergency powers on the oil industry. Certainly in the long run, we have to review the oil deregulation, but what we have to do right now is to temporarily step in, not really to take over, not really to dictate the prices per se, but we have to ask for more transparency from our gas companies, especially the largest ones declared just weeks ago that they recorded record high net income, they have double-digit earnings growth, because for workers, we have been sacrificing for far too long and sacrificing more now. Government has already expressed willingness to sacrifice even the tax revenue from excise taxes, but we are actually calling for the complete removal of excise tax and VAT, not just reduction of the excise tax, because that's 10 pesos per liter for gasoline, 6 pesos per liter for diesel. But also, what about the gas companies? Are they willing also to sacrifice? Are they willing to share in the burden of this crisis? Because it appears to us it's only government and workers expressing openness to sacrifice. What about the gas companies?
Sir, a final question. No? What are your conversations with the minimum wage workers apart from increase in the minimum pay and ayuda that is being given to some of these workers? What else are you calling for? And is this not the suspension of the fare hike something positive? Because of course these are commuters, no? May relief in a certain way for their transport. Give us more of an idea of what other measures you are calling for.
Kinikilala namin yung rason para dun sa suspension ng fare hike na banggit yung mga manggagawa nating namamasahe. Ngunit ayaw naman natin pagsabungin, no, yung ating manggagawa sa transport sector bis yung mga manggagawang minimum na namamasahe, no. So kaya ang aming panawagan, no, even just yesterday, we even called on Congress to conduct special session to discuss the proposed legislated wage increase. But that is already, we are way over that. That is why we are now calling on the regional wage boards to actually revisit the prevailing minimum wage rates. And we are even proposing an innovation is that the regional wage boards can immediately issue an order calling for an emergency cost of living allowance for our over 5 million minimum wage earners. This is on top of our proposed provisions such as for these SSS, GSIS, Pag-ibig to offer extended calamity loans and to suspend their amortization, monthly amortization payments. We are also calling for subsidies as well, targeted subsidies, just like the small business wage subsidy we had during the pandemic for our MSMEs, because they also have to sustain their operations so that they will not lay off workers. So all of these proposals that we keep on proposing to the executive, we hope that it will land in their ears. That's why we're calling for a national emergency summit. The president, unfortunately, has not yet met collectively with the labor movement or together with the business community already 4 years into this administration. And we believe that this crisis should be a wake-up call for this Marcos administration to actually listen to the workers of this country.
Sir, this isn't the first time, no, that we've seen oil prices. You already mentioned, meron namang during the pandemic, may libreng sakay as the government provided those efforts. And then you had the Russia-Ukraine war, no, in 2022 when we saw the fuel prices also jump very high. Can you give us some clarity on what happened po sa during those times that you're saying pwede natin gawin this time around so that we can prevent a bigger, as you mentioned, cushion the blow?
Yeah. During the 2008-2009 crisis then, that was the time when cost of living allowance was given to over 5 million minimum wage earners. During the pandemic, there was small business wage subsidy because during the pandemic, there was suspension of any legislated wage hike for I think around 3 years in the National Capital Region and 4 years outside the region. What they did then was to give small business wage subsidy, meaning it is as if government is paying for the portion of the wages of workers in the small and micro businesses. There was also the calamity loans. Calamity loans were offered during the pandemic, and we believe that this is also some form of a calamity, personal crisis for many of our workers, as well as loan restructuring programs so that our workers can borrow more, less interest, and they have longer terms to pay for it. But these are, again, short-term stopgap measures that we can propose. But at the end of the day, what remains is fundamental. The workers' wages are so small that they are below the poverty threshold, that they are no way near the living wage. And that is why it is high time, especially during this crisis, for us to seriously consider a 100 to 200 pesos legislated wage increase. So, of course, the businesses would say no to this. But they have been saying no during the normal times, business as usual times. I think during a crisis, it is high time because yung manggagawa ang unang naapektuhan ng krisis na to. Pero almost always, kami yung huling natutulungan, walang subsidy, ang hinihingi lang namin ay yung aumento sa sweldo that we deserve.
Maraming salamat. That's your plea to the government. Thank you, TUCP spokesperson Carlos Miguel Oñate, for spending your morning with us.